Cesare Borgia. On the Borgias, it is
Lucrezia.
Of the Borgias, it is Lucrezia, perhaps, who has the worst reputation. But all she was weak. It was her brother, the tyrant and murderer Cesare Borgia, who seduced and tormented her. And then, mad with jealousy, scared off her first husband and murdered her second. After Cesare was wounded in the battle and left to die, she lived a blameless life for another 11 years. Cesare Borgia, like Sister Lucrezia, Cesare Borgia, like Sister Lucrezia, was the bastard child of a courtesan. Cesare Borgia, like Sister Lucrezia, was the bastard child of a courtesan and a cardinal who later, in 1492, became Pope. He was immediately, aged 16, appointed Archbishop of Valencia. Archbishop. Archbishop of Valencia. By 17, he was a cardinal. But it wasn't enough for the unscrupulous unscrupulous. But it wasn't enough for the unscrupulous, spoiled brat. For what he wanted was power. Power over people. Power over the affairs of state. Not for nothing was he the model of Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. Power over people he satisfied sexually. He slept with every woman who attracted him, among them his sister and his brother's intended wife, and regularly had his homosexual partners either poisoned or assassinated. The Venetian. The Venetian ambassador later wrote, "Every night 4 or 5 murdered men are discovered, bishops, prelates, and others, so that all Rome is trembling for fear of being destroyed by the Duke Cesare." Power over the affairs of state, though, took more time, for elder brother Giovanni had been made head of the papal army, and at the beginning of his reign, the Pope made a mistake when the king of Naples died. He immediately recognized the king's son as his successor. Charles VIII of France, believing he himself had a better claim, promptly invaded, and the Borgias were forced into a humiliating retreat. Cesare was taken as a hostage, and though he subsequently escaped, he wanted personal revenge for the humiliations he'd suffered at the hands of the French court. He murdered all those he could find who had witnessed them, and then had a group of Swiss mercenaries who'd broken into his mother's house during the Frenchman's stay in Rome tortured to death. As far as the politics of state were concerned, however, fate soon played into his hands, for brother Giovanni had disgraced himself in a campaign against the Orsini family, who'd collaborated with the French. So Cesare had him assassinated and, abandoning his church titles, took over Giovanni's roles as his father's military and political right hand man. Allied to the French again by now, and married to the King of Navarre's 16-year-old sister, he set about the business of bringing rebellious nobles into line and carving out a kingdom for himself in the area south of Venice. As a commander, he was every bit as devious and ruthless as he had been as a cardinal. In one captured town, he ordered 40 of the prettiest virgins to be brought to him for deflowering. In another, he demanded that its female ruler be brought to his bed, and wrote, and wrote, and wrote gloatingly, 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 and wrote gloatingly to his father about what transpired. In yet another, he promised to give safe passage to its young master in return for his surrender, only to have him sent to Rome and tortured to death. His friends and allies also suffered. He double crossed the Duke of Urbino, had his own deputy hacked in two and displayed on a public square, and when he suspected disloyalty among those around him, invited them to a banquet and had them strangled. Every time Cesare returned to Rome, the body count went up there. In 1500, he had Sister Lucrezia's Neapolitan husband waylaid. And when he refused, to die of his wounds, strangled him personally. He was also an adept poisoner. He was also adept. He was also an adept poisoner. And it was poison in the end that brought him down. For in 1503, he and his father were invited by a cardinal to a banquet at a vineyard outside Rome. Both later became ill. his father died, and Cesare's life began to unravel. He was arrested and forced to give up his new kingdom. He fled to Naples, where he was again arrested, this time for disturbing the peace of Italy, and was sent to jail in Spain. He escaped once more to join the army of his brother-in-law, but after being wounded at a siege, he was recognized, stripped entirely naked, and left to die of thirst. That's it. Now let's change subject into philosophy. Here I brought you Think Like a Mountain. Think Like a Mountain, okay? There we go. Let me just untie this knot here. There. And what do we have here, for example? Okay. Excellent. Hi, Nor Bibi Abdullahi. Hi, Josie Forever. How are you? Okay, let's try this. Think like a mountain. Okay, let's do something better. Instead of this, I will put this down. I think it's better that way. Okay, so there you go. Think like a mountain. Okay, there you go. Think like a mountain. Think Like a Mountain, Arne, 1912, 2009. Why the color is so blurry? I don't understand this. If I do that, still taking a good look. I don't know why. Okay. The injunction, okay, in context, let's take a look at this. In context, branch ethics, approach environmental philosophy. Before 1660, Benedictus Spinoza develops his philosophy of nature as an extension of God. 1949, Aldo Leopold's The Sand County Almanac is published. 1960, British scientist James Lovelock first proposes his Gaia hypothesis, exploring the natural world as a single self-regulating system. In 1962, American biologist Rachel Carson publishes Silent Spring, which becomes an important influence on Naess's thinking. After 1984, Zen master and teacher Robert Aitken Roshi combines deep ecology with the ideas of the Japanese Buddhist philosopher Dogen. Join me here, please. Without desperation, without despair, just join me here, okay? So the injunction to think like a mountain has become closely associated with the concept of deep ecology, a term coined in 1973 by the Norwegian philosopher and environmental campaigner Arne. He uses the term to stress his belief that we must first recognize we are part of a nature and not separate from it if we are to avoid environmental catastrophe. But the notion of thinking like a mountain goes back to 1949 when it was expressed by American ecologist Aldo Leopold in the Sand County Almanac. Working as a forester in New Mexico in the early part of the 20th century, Leopold shot a female wolf on the mountainside. We reached the old wolf in time to watch a fierce green fire dying in her eyes, he wrote. I realized then, and have known ever since, that there was something new to me in those eyes, something known only to her and to the mountain. It was from this experience that Leopold came to the idea that we should think like a mountain, recognizing not just our needs or those of our fellow humans, but those of the entire natural world. He implies that often we miss the broader implications of our actions, only considering the immediate benefits to ourselves. Think like a mountain means identifying with the wider environment and being aware of its role in our lives. Here we have a quote from Arne that says, "The thinking for the future has to be loyal to nature." Here's another graph. Thinking like a mountain is realizing that we are part of the biosphere, realizing our responsibilities to all other living things. We must think about long term interests of the environment as a whole. Harmonizing with nature. Naess takes up Leopold's idea by proposing his deep ecology. He states that we only protect our environment by undergoing the kind of transformation of which Leopold writes. Naess urges us to move towards seeing ourselves as a part of the whole biosphere. Instead of viewing the world with a kind of detachment, we must find our place in nature by acknowledging the intrinsic value of all elements of the world we inhabit. Naess introduces the ecological self, a sense of self that is rooted in an awareness of our relationship to a larger community of all living beings. He claims that broadening our identification with the world to include wolves, frogs, spiders, and perhaps even mountains leads to a more joyful and meaningful life. Naess' deep ecology has had a powerful effect on environmental philosophy and on the development of environmental activism. For those of us who live in cities, it may seem hard, even impossible, to connect with an ecological self. Nevertheless, it may be possible. As the Zen master Robert Aitken Roshi wrote in 1984, when one thinks like a mountain, one thinks also like the black bear, so that honey dribbles down your fur as you catch the bus to work. Here we have a photograph that says, the natural world for Naess is not something that we should strive to control and manipulate for our own gain. Living well involves living as an equal with all the elements of our environment. Here we have a picture of the philosopher Arne. And here, widely acknowledged as the leading Norwegian philosopher of the 20th century, Arne became the youngest ever full professor at the University of Oslo at the age of 27. He was also a noted mountaineer and led a successful expedition to the summit of Tirich-Mir in northern Pakistan in 1950. It was only after Naess retired from his teaching post in 1970 that he actively developed his thinking about the natural world and became involved in direct action on environmental issues. In 1970, he chained himself to the rocks by the Mardalsfossen waterfall in Norway to protest against the building of a nearby dam. Elected as chairperson of Greenpeace Norway in 1988, he was knighted in 2005. Key works: 1968, Skepticism; 1974, Ecology, Society, and Lifestyle; 1988, Thinking Like a Mountain with John Seed, Pat Fleming, and Joanna Macy; 2002, Life's Philosophy, Reason, and Feeling in a Deeper World. That was it. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow, guys. Thank you to Josie. Thank you, Josie, forever. Goodbye.